The call came in at 2:47 on a Wednesday afternoon while I was counting out metformin behind the pharmacy counter. Sophie's name on my screen. That was odd on its own. She was supposed to be napping at home with Kyle watching her, which was the arrangement I had made because I couldn't afford the full-time daycare rate and he was right there. Her little Garmin watch only called when something was wrong. She knew that. She was 5. I stepped into the dispensary alcove and picked up. Mommy. Her voice was the kind of thin that meant she'd already been crying for a while. Uncle Kyle changed the door. I can't get into my room. He told me to sit outside. My hand went flat against the counter. Sophie, baby, where are you right now? On the step. A hiccup, he said to wait. Then I heard my brother's voice in the background, not shouting, calm in the way that's actually worse than shouting. Soph, come here. Give me the watch. The call ended. I stood in that alcove for 4 seconds. I know it was 4 because I counted them on the dispensary clock. Then I told my supervisor I had a family emergency, and I walked out to my car and I sat in the driver's seat and I called the watch back. It rang 11 times and went to Sophie's recorded greeting. Hi, this is Sophie and I am 5. She had been so proud of that recording. She had made me listen to it 6 times the day she set it up. I drove home to Guelph in 23 minutes from downtown. I do not remember a single traffic light. To understand what I was driving toward, you have to understand where I came from. And that is a longer story than I used to think it was. My name is Holly and I am 31 years old. I work as a pharmacy technician at a small independent pharmacy on Stone Road, and my days are quiet in the way I have worked very hard to make them. I wake Sophie at 7. I do the voices for her stuffed animals while she gets dressed. There is a bear named Captain that apparently speaks in a very specific low grumble, and she will correct me if I get it wrong, every single morning without fail. I drop her at Waverly Kindergarten by 8:15. Then I spend the day counting pills and counseling patients, and I think about her every hour on the hour like a heartbeat. It is not a spectacular life, but I built it from scratch after a year that nearly took me apart completely. My ex-husband Patrick and I separated when Sophie was 2. It was not dramatic, it was the slow kind of ending that you almost miss while it's happening. When it was over, I was a newly single mother with a modest income, a storage unit full of things I didn't know what to do with, and a very small daughter who kept asking where Daddy's shoes were. What saved me, practically saved me, the way a life preserver saves you, was my grandmother Elspeth, who passed in the spring of 2022 and left me $38,000 in her estate. Grandma Elspeth had worked the counter at a hardware store in Barrie for 30 years, and she spent almost nothing on herself. She told me once that the best thing a woman could own was a door she could close. I took her at her word. I put the inheritance together with everything I had managed to save, and I bought a townhouse in Guelph's South End. 2 bedrooms, a small backyard, a kitchen that needed regrouting, a water heater I had already replaced twice. The mortgage runs just over $1,500 a month. On a pharmacy technician's pay, that makes me what my financial advisor calls house rich and cash tight. I buy Sophie's snow boots a size up so they last the whole winter. I know which Zehrs has the best markdown schedule on meat. I have not taken a vacation since 2021. But Sophie has a door she can close, and her name is on a height chart on the kitchen doorframe in permanent marker, a new line every birthday, and to her the townhouse is the entire world. This is ours, right, Mommy? She asked me once, pressing both palms flat against the front door, like she was feeling it for warmth. Always, baby, always. I want you to remember that word because I said it to her again, later, across a room full of people who had decided it wasn't true. My parents, Carol and Bruce, never helped with the house. Not with the down payment, not with a single mortgage payment, not with so much as an afternoon of labor when I was painting the hallway. I mention this plainly because of what came later, when they stood in a dining room and talked about the townhouse, as though they were entitled to weigh in on its future. And then there is my brother Kyle. Kyle is 35, and he has always been the kind of person that rooms reorganize themselves around. When we were teenagers, every family dinner bent toward whatever Kyle was dealing with. When he was 28 and lost his job at a tech firm in Waterloo, he moved back into our parents' house for 14 months, and my mother spoke of it as though he had been through a war. When his long-term relationship with his partner ended last year, and he lost the apartment in Toronto they'd shared, my mother called me on a Tuesday evening with that particular texture in her voice, the one that had meant, my entire life, that I was about to be asked to make room. "He has nowhere to go right now," she said. "You have the spare room. It would just be a few weeks, just until he finds something." The spare room was more of a storage space than a room. There was a fold-out sofa and a set of shelves I had built myself from a flat-pack kit, and an IKEA lamp that flickered. But it was a room. And Kyle was my brother. And I was always the one told to have more room in my heart than I actually had. He moved in on the 1st of March. One bag became 3 boxes by the weekend, then a small truckload of things that filled the garage, before I understood that the garage was now simply where Kyle kept his things. He was polite about it. He was pleasant over dinner. He played with Sophie and she adored him, the way children adore people who have no rules and no bedtimes and no discipline they have to follow through on. I told myself it would be 6 weeks. I told myself that every week for 4 months. The signs, when I traced them back now, were not subtle. I just did not want to read them as a pattern, because the pattern would have required me to act, and acting meant conflict. And conflict with Kyle had always meant becoming the unreasonable one. He changed the Wi-Fi password in April. A security thing, he said. He had set up a new router. He would send me the new password. He did, eventually, 2 days later after I had been using my phone data the entire time and had not said a single word about it. My hydro bill was higher in May than it had ever been. Kyle used the space heater in his room constantly and left it running when he went out. In June, my neighbor Bet Kowalczyk from number 12 flagged me down in the driveway. Bet is a retired schoolteacher, a widow, and she has been on this street longer than any other resident. She notices everything and she says what she sees, which I have always respected about her. "I saw a fellow going through your mail on Tuesday," she told me. "Tallish dark jacket. He was at the box for a good while. I assumed family, but—" "That was my brother," I said. "He's staying with me." She nodded, slowly. The way people nod when they are being polite about something they are not sure they believe. "How long has he been staying?" "A few months, just temporarily." She went inside. That slow nod stayed with me the rest of the afternoon, and I could not say why. Kyle had been receiving his own mail at my address, not just parcels, actual mail. He had updated his driver's license address to my townhouse. I found the confirmation document in the recycling bin by accident. When I asked him about it, he said it was easier while he was sorting things out. Practical. Temporary. Practical. Temporary. 2 words doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting for 4 months. Sophie began changing in June, and this I could not explain away. She started wetting the bed again, something she had been fully past for 2 years. She became clingy in a way that had a different quality to ordinary 5-year-old clinginess. It was the clinginess of a child, afraid of something she could not name. On mornings when Kyle was watching her while I worked, she stood at the door with her fingers wrapped around the strap of my bag, and her whole body rigid. "I want to go to the pharmacy with you," she said one morning. "Sweetie, you can't. It's not a place for kids." Her lip pressed flat. She did not say anything else. She just watched me go. Ms. Wynne at Waverly mentioned it at pickup one afternoon. Sophie had been quiet on a few days. Not upset, exactly. Quiet. Inward. Ms. Wynne was the kind of teacher who noticed the difference and said so carefully, watching my face as she spoke. "She's adjusting," I said. "We have a family member staying with us. New routine." Ms. Nguyen nodded slowly. I have thought about that moment many times since. Sophie started sending me messages on her Garmin watch. The watch had a function, I barely used it, where she could record a voice memo and send it to my phone directly. She had mostly used it to send me recordings of Captain the Bear's voice, which she performed herself in a deep growl that made me laugh on hard days. But in June and into July, the messages changed. I half listened to them at the time. I was counting pills, driving, making dinner. They sounded like toddler chatter. I filed them away. I played them back in order, weeks later, sitting on the floor of a motel room off the 401. And I understood, listening to them in sequence, that my daughter had been trying to warn me the only way she knew how, and I had not been paying close enough attention to hear her. The first one, from 3 weeks before the Wednesday in August. Mommy, Uncle Kyle had a man here today. They looked at the walls a lot, he said, don't tell. A pause. The bear says hi. The second one, 2 weeks before. Mommy, Uncle Kyle says this is going to be his house. He said not to worry about it. Is it true? The third one, 10 days before. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I had to press the phone flat against my ear to hear it. Uncle Kyle said, if I tell you the secret, you'll be very sad and you might go away. I don't want you to go away, Mommy. I played that one 4 times. My daughter had been carrying that for 10 days. Someone she was supposed to be able to trust had told her that telling the truth would cause her mother to disappear. And she had still been trying, in the only way she had, to reach me. I have done a lot of forgiving since then. That particular piece takes the longest. But I am getting ahead of myself. I turned onto my street and looked for Sophie on the front step, where she had said she was sitting. The step was empty. The step and the small patch of front lawn and the window with the curtain. Sophie and I had picked together from HomeSense last spring, a blue and white print she had chosen because it looked like a kite. I got out of the car. The new lock caught the afternoon light. Brass, bright, recently fitted. My key went in and stopped. Wrong cut. Wrong cylinder. The whole mechanism had been changed. I went around to the side door off the kitchen. Changed. The back gate had a new padlock. Every way into the house I paid for, sealed against me in a single afternoon while I was dispensing prescriptions and making small talk about blood pressure readings. Bet was already coming down her driveway. Her coat was not done up, which told me she had come out quickly. A man came around noon, she said. I thought it seemed odd. I should have called you. Holly, where is Sophie? I did not know. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring and told me, in a voice calibrated for calm, that Sophie was there, that Kyle had dropped her off, that everyone was fine and I needed to take a breath. Kyle answered my text 4 minutes later. She's safe. Don't make this dramatic. I called the police. The officer who came was unhurried and patient, and in the moment his calmness made me want to scream. He explained the part I had not known, and Kyle apparently had, that a person residing at an address for a significant period, particularly in Ontario, may have acquired tenancy rights under the Residential Tenancies Act, and that removing him was not as simple as changing the locks back. It was a civil matter. It would take time and a tribunal. But he said something else, and he said it looking directly at me. Your daughter is your daughter. There is no order giving anyone else authority over her. That's not a civil matter. That's clear. Go get her. I drove to my parents' house. Sophie heard my car before I reached the front walk. The curtain in the front window moved. When my mother opened the door, Sophie came out from behind her legs and launched herself at my knees, so hard I had to catch the railing. She was still in her pajamas. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. Not one adult in that house had thought to dress her. Kyle appeared in the doorway. He reached for Sophie's shoulder, a smooth, practiced motion, the gesture of someone reclaiming something they considered theirs. She just calmed down, he said. Don't wind her up again. I picked Sophie up. She buried her face in my neck and stayed there. My father did most of the talking at the kitchen table. He talked about stability, about how Kyle was home during the days, how I worked long hours, how Sophie needed consistency. He spoke as though the words had been prepared in advance, and I believe now that they had. My mother set a folder on the table, printed pages, I could see the edges. She rested her hand on it and looked at me with an expression she had refined over decades, the one that looked like love and functioned as a trap. "We're just worried," she said. "After everything you went through when Patrick left. The panic attacks. The months you weren't quite yourself. We don't want it to reach that point again. Kyle is steady right now. He could give Sophie what she needs while you get back on top of things." There it was. My worst year, repackaged as evidence. Not said with cruelty, my mother was never cruel in ways that left marks anyone could point to. Said with concern so plausible that arguing with it made you look exactly as unsteady as she had suggested. She looked down at the folder. If anyone felt they had no choice but to contact the Children's Aid Society, I kept my voice very quiet, quieter than hers. "She is my daughter. She leaves with me tonight." I looked at Kyle, I looked at the folder. The rest of this settles where it counts. Not here. I came for Sophie, I left with her. In the car I did the voice for Captain the Bear. Sophie laughed once, small and surprised, and then went quiet and put her hand over mine on the gear shift. I checked us into a motel off the 401, and I ordered delivery from a place that did toasted tomato soup, her request. And I sat on the floor while she slept across both pillows, and I opened the Garmin Companion app for the first time in months. The voice memos were all there, dated and in order. I played them until 2 in the morning. Here's what I found in the week that followed, because finding things out is the part that takes time, and the part people skip over when they tell a story like this. Bet had the locksmith's business card. She had taken it off the door when she saw the van, just in case, the way a woman who has lived on one street for many years learns to take a business card. She called the company and confirmed the job date, the address, and who had signed for the work, pretending to settle a billing question. She had not been asked to do any of this. She had simply done it because she was paying attention when I was not. The building management office confirmed that Kyle had introduced himself to the property superintendent in July as a co-owner and had requested information about interior renovation permits. Nothing had been submitted formally, but he had asked. He had been laying groundwork I had not been watching him pour. In a drawer he had left half open, I found a printed page from a real estate listing site. A comparables summary for my street. My address was circled in pen. He had not acted in rage or impulse. He had been planning it, the way you plan something you intend to keep. I sat with the why for a long time. Then it came to me, and it was simpler and more devastating than I had expected. Kyle had walked away from Toronto with his personal belongings and nothing else. No savings I knew of, no property, 35 years old, and nothing he could put his name on. And then he had looked at me, his younger sister, the fragile one, the one who had panic attacks, who had a messy divorce and a small daughter, and he had seen my house. And somewhere along the way he had decided that wanting it was the same thing as having a right to it. And my family had handed him every argument he needed by spending years telling everyone I was the one who needed looking after. He did not hate me. I think that is almost worse. He simply believed I deserved it less. I sat in that motel parking lot for a long time. Then I dried my face and I made a list. Not feelings, facts, dates, what I could prove and what I still needed. My parents' 40th anniversary dinner fell on the following Saturday. My mother had planned it for 6 months. 23 people on the guest list. My mother's sister from Kingston, my father's brother and his wife. Cousins I had not seen since Christmas. The kind of gathering where my family performed the best version of itself for an audience. My mother had called the day before with the warmth she reserved for invitations she expected to be received as gifts. "Come, Holly, bring Sophie. We can sort out the arrangement over dessert, like a family, like adults." Like adults. As though I were the child who needed managing. I said I would be there. Kyle smiled at me from across the room when we arrived. The smile of a man who thought he already knew the evening's ending. My parents were warm and welcoming. My mother's sister complimented Sophie's dress. Everything was perfectly normal in the way that catastrophes are normal in the minutes before they arrive. Sophie stayed close to me. I had not asked her to. My mother stood after the main course, touched her wine glass with a fork, and the room went quiet, the way it always went quiet for her. Kyle has been such a steady presence for Sophie, she began. And as a family, we've been thinking. Kyle was already moving towards Sophie, that practiced reach, that proprietary confidence. Sophie took 2 steps sideways and pressed herself against my leg. I set my phone on the table, face up, where the whole room could see it. Before we talk about what's been decided, I said, I think everyone here should hear a few things first. My mother started to speak. I pressed play. Sophie's voice came out of the phone and into the dining room, thin and clear and 5 years old, above the anniversary flowers and the good tablecloth. Uncle Kyle said if I tell you the secret you'll be very sad and you might go away. No one moved. My mother's sister's hand flew to her mouth. My father looked at the phone, then at his older son, and something behind his eyes began quietly to come apart. I let the silence work. My mother had taught me that. That is my daughter's voice, I said. Recorded on her GPS watch 3 weeks ago. I did not know she had sent it until I sat in a motel room and played back 4 months of messages I had been too distracted to hear. She had been trying to tell me. She had been trying the whole time. I slid the locksmith's receipt down the length of the table. It came to rest near my father's plate. The locks on my house were changed the morning before Kyle told you I wasn't coping. Not after a fight. Not in a panic. The work was booked in advance. Here is the service order. Here is the date. Here is his name at the bottom. My father picked up the receipt. He read it. He set it down. He did not look at Kyle. The building superintendent confirmed, I said, that Kyle introduced himself as co-owner in July and asked about renovation permits. He had updated his driver's license address to my home without my knowledge. He had been receiving mail there for 5 months. He had a comparables sheet for my street with my address circled in pen. I looked at my mother. I held her gaze the way she had held mine at kitchen tables my entire life. And I want to read back something you said to me, I said. Because I saved it, I have it in 3 places. I played the voicemail. Her voice came out of the phone, soft and poisonous, the way she kept her most dangerous words. If anyone felt they had no choice but to call the Children's Aid Society, for Sophie's sake, of course. I would just hate for it to come to that, Holly. It's still up to you how this goes. The room was completely still. A false report, I said quietly, made by a grandparent without evidence, against a fit custodial mother with a clean record, and a letter from her own therapist, confirming full discharge, gets screened out. I have already spoken to a family lawyer about what you were threatening. She told me it would go nowhere. You were pointing something at me that wasn't loaded, and you were betting I was too frightened to check. I looked around the table, at cousins who had not called, at my father's brother staring at his plate, at my mother's sister with tears running down her face. My grandmother left me that house, I said. My name is on the land transfer. I hold the deed. There is nothing to arrange and nothing to decide as a family. The only question that was ever on this table tonight is what kind of people you all chose to be while this was happening. Sophie reached up and took my hand. Kyle put the house keys on the table. He set them down quietly, without ceremony, and then he picked up his jacket and walked out, and the front door closed behind him. And the room sat in the silence he left, and no one spoke. And eventually people began looking for their coats. Real life does not resolve itself in a single dinner. That is the part that takes longer to tell. Kyle left Guelph within the month. I received one text 3 weeks later that said simply, I didn't think it would go that far. I have read it many times, and I still cannot tell whether it was an apology or a complaint. My father called 2 days after the anniversary dinner and asked if he could come by. He sat in my kitchen with his coat on, and he said the truest thing I had ever heard him say. That he had always chosen Kyle because it was easier, that he had looked away because looking meant having to do something, and that he was going to be sorry about it for a long time. He asked to see Sophie on whatever terms I set, only those. I set terms. He has kept them. He comes on Sunday afternoons and builds things with her in the backyard. little wooden birdhouses from kits she picks at the dollar store. And he is patient in a way he was not when I was a child. It is not the relationship I wanted from him for 31 years. But it is real, and I do not slam doors that people are genuinely trying to walk through the right way. My mother called twice, both times to explain how hard all of this had been on her, how fractured the family was now, how I had humiliated everyone at a dinner that was supposed to be a celebration. She was sorry it had happened. She was not once sorry for what she had done to me or to her granddaughter. There is a specific grief in mourning a parent who is still alive and simply refuses to come to you without conditions. I carry it. I do not pretend it isn't there, but I would rather carry that grief than hand her back the ability to use Sophie as leverage. I had the locks changed one final time by a locksmith I chose myself, and I kept every key. I went to Waverly in person and updated Sophie's authorized contacts at the front desk, with Ms. Wynne standing beside me. I explained what I could in a school hallway. Ms. Wynne listened carefully, and when I finished, she said, "She's been more herself this week. I've noticed." She said it like a small gift, which is what it was. Sophie sees a play therapist now, a woman with a bright office in the West End and a sandbox and small figurines she lets Sophie arrange however she wants. The work is slow and quiet, but Sophie does not wet the bed anymore. She stopped asking. At some point, I cannot pinpoint exactly whether the house was still ours. Last week she measured herself on the kitchen doorframe, on her own with a ruler and a pencil while I was doing the dishes. She had been watching me do it every birthday, and she had the method exactly right. Heel flat to the baseboard, chin level, pencil mark straight across. "Mommy, come see how tall I got." I dried my hands, and I went and stood next to her mark on the wood, and I looked at the line of marks going back 3 years, rising by centimeters toward the hinge. She still uses the Garmin watch. She calls me in the middle of my shift sometimes, just to say, "Mommy, the bear says hi." Then she hangs up before I can answer, delighted with her own daring. My grandmother Elspeth said the best thing a woman could own was a door she could close. She was right. But I understand it differently now than I did when I was making the down payment. A door is just wood and hardware. What makes it a home is knowing exactly who holds the key, and knowing that no one who has ever handed that key out of love and called it temporary gets to decide it was always theirs. No one hands you that knowledge. You earn it. Sometimes the earning is quiet and takes years. Sometimes it arrives the way Sophie's voice arrived through a phone at 2:47 on a Wednesday afternoon, sudden and small and very clear, asking you to finally stop filing things away and listen. I listened. The townhouse on my street is still ours, every room of it, every pencil mark on every doorframe, and Sophie knows, all the way down to the ground, exactly which door opens for her.